All right, on today's episode, an episode nobody cares about, but we're still going to talk about. We're going to talk about 40 caliber versus 10 millimeter versus 45. And when I say versus, it's like I'd rather just talk about information about each caliber and then how I guess you could correlate against each other. Because in reality, there's no direct, exact way you could 100% say this for that, that for this, because there's always going to be down to perspective. Um, you could say politics, you could say preference, and let's say politics too, because if you're like in a communist, if you're in a state with more 451 laws, they're going to limit you to 10 rounds. So if that's the case, most guys there are going to want to go with something as big as possible because you only got 10 rounds. But so we're not going to include that, I guess, really, because those people are slaves of. And they are. If you're in a state that says you can only have 10 round magazines, you're a slave. Imagine having gun rights, but not having gun rights. I mean, yeah, you could do. That's like someone telling you could fuck your wife, but not on Tuesday and Thursday. Really? And if you, or what? Or we put you in jail. I mean, does that make any sense? Does that say that in the Constitution? Anyways, though. So all Glocks here, Glock 22, which is all full size as well. Different generations though. I mean, the big boys, the 45 and the 10 miller Gen 4. This is Gen 2, classic. That's irrelevant to the caliber though. There was some changes along the generations, but we're not here to talk about Glock generations. So the point is though, let's talk about caliber. Now, the pros. We're going to talk about the actual cartridge itself. Then we'll talk about how the cartridge plays within the actual firearm. So being that these are all full size, we have the best case with velocity and best case with capacity, meaning they use the larger magazine. Now, of course, you could stick a larger extended magazine in it. In all these calibers, they actually make official Glock extended magazines, which, okay, so that's really irrelevant because they all can do that. Meaning, so it's not like one has an advantage over that. Okay. So the bottom line is though, we have 40 caliber, we have 10 millimeter, and we have 45. Now in this case, that's a 45 plus B cartridge. And that would be very common, whereas you don't really see 10 millimeter or 40 caliber plus P. I guess it could be possible, especially if you're going with Underwood and or Buffalo Bore. They have some heavier cartridges though. But that's going to be very limited and very expensive. However, 45 plus P is very common. Remember, plus P doesn't make the bullet bigger. And I don't care if you're using expanded ammunition or frag ammunition, the bullets never get bigger. The weight is the weight. In this case, this is really maximum 180 grains, and sometimes you see 200, but really, as far as what you're going to find in the store, is 180 grains. In 10 millimeter, generally it's 180 on the same, but you could find some 200 grain 10 millimeter. Of course, there's always some extremes, or maybe something bigger, but we're not talking about that, but okay, it's possible. And then 45, generally the max is 230, but of course you could find a 250, 255, or something that's bigger, some extreme ammunition case. But generally speaking, it's high on the 230, low on the 185, in the middle at 200 to 220. Anyways, speaking though, generally 180 and generally 230. Okay, but there's going to be some play. At the end of the day, though, the 40 caliber came out after 10 millimeter, and the 10 millimeter is the father of 40 caliber. The 40 caliber is the son. 40 caliber is simply a shortened case of 10 millimeter. There's going to be some differences, maybe in the cartridge, in the case, and everything, and pressure. We're not here to talk about that. For all intents and purposes, 40 caliber came out because there was a lot of people that couldn't handle full power 10 millimeter. Remember, here's the we're going to go into that too. Today's 10 millimeter as a standard, most major companies aren't giving you 10 millimeter. They're really giving you 40 caliber, maybe 40 caliber plus P. What do I mean by that? Well, look at the velocity, look at the energy. Even if it says on the box, but they didn't verify, look at people that test ammunition. Here's the problem, major problem with today's 10 millimeter. Most 10 millimeter on today's market is not 10 millimeter. It's not. 10 millimeter should be 180 grain bullet minimum at 1250 feet per second, which would be 250 feet per second faster than a 180. A full powered 180 grain 40 caliber is 1,000 feet per second, giving you about 400 pounds of energy. This going 1250 feet per second, if it was 180 grain, is a significant increase in power. Roughly, give or take, about 50% more energy. So if everything's done proper, without getting an extreme, 10 millimeters should be 50% more powerful than the equal weighted grain 40 caliber. Because once you start playing with the grains, if you go low in one, whatever, because you can say, well, I could get a 135 grain 40 caliber smoking and going up to almost 700 pounds of energy. Yeah, of course. But remember, that's also the bullet is going to get a lot shorter. When you go down in grain, you're getting a shorter bullet. And that still can be effective, but if you're talking about for large game, or about bear protection or whatever, there's always a trade-off when you go with faster, lighter bullets. Anyways, though, so the point is, at least most companies, when it comes to 40 caliber, you're generally getting some stout 40 caliber rounds, especially in the 155, 165 category. So at least when you go with 40 caliber, you're going to get a thinner, lighter gun compared to a 45 and 10, and at least the ammunition you're going to getting is going to have less recoil. The 40 is going to have less recoil than 45 and 10. Because now you say, well, remember, this gun here in 45 is much bigger and heavier than this. So if you had the equivalent, if you had a skinny, if you had a very thin 45 or equal in weight to this, it would have more recoil. So to balance that off, I mean, these are bigger, heavier guns than the 9mm or the 40 caliber segment. So the offset might feel the same or less than 40, but remember, you're getting a lighter gun with 40, easier to carry. So in the Glock series, you're going to get standard 15 rounds of 40, 13 rounds of 45, and 15 rounds of 10mm. So the 10mm 40, there's no loss. And the 45, you lose 2. But here's the overhead. Here's 13. Remember capacity doesn't matter here. If this was, son of a bitch. Give me a second. I'm messing up my little pretty display there. If this was the chamber, obviously the chamber you'd have +1, but whatever. But if this was the first round, you had to defend yourself. 45 in this case, it only has 2 less rounds down here. Meaning for those first 13 or 14, if you want +1 rounds, you get what I'm saying? So capacity matters later. Capability matters now. So for example, if you're going, both 40 and 10mm, if you're using proper 10mm, it's much more powerful than 40. And let's just say same or more capacity, whatever it is, the 10mm has more capability at every round. Now, 10mm is going to have more recoil than the 40 caliber. If that's a factor for you, if you can't control the 10mm, then just go with 40 caliber, right? And then 45 has a lot of play, because you can have some real soft range ammunition that sub 400 pounds of energy, like 360, 350, but still a big 230 grain bullet. You can't slouch on the big ass bullet. 230 grain bullet is a big fucking bullet. However, though, when you get to hollow points, if you go with a compact 45 and a shorter barrel, especially if you go with a non-+P, that ammunition might not get to the proper velocity to expand if you're seeking expansion. A lot of guys prefer 45 at a +P and a hard-nosed, flat-nosed lead bullet, maybe a coated bullet so it doesn't let up the barrel. But still, 45 in a flat nose with a big, fat, fucking flat bullet in +P, going 900 to 1,000 feet per second. But remember, it's a 250 grain bullet. Is steamrolling. So that being said, yeah, 45 due to its slower nature because of its heavy grain. In a compact barrel, it still can be effective, but what I'm saying is you might not, if you're seeking the expansion, I think that's what you're paying for, you might not be getting it. Or a compact 10 or 40, especially if you go like 165 grain or 155 grain, which would be mid or almost light for caliber. they're still going to be smoking. We'll have plenty of velocity for expansion. So, anyways, what are we here to talk about? I don't know. All these calibers are very effective. What I'm trying to say is the biggest problem I see is with 10 millimeter in today. And what do I mean by that is those that say they are 10 millimeter that are not 10 millimeter. There's a lot of 10 millimeter ammo that is not, that literally is downloaded to 40 caliber. So you're just paying more money for the brass, more money for your gun to have a large 10 millimeter gun, and you're paying for heavier weight in the gun to get 40 cal power. So what I'm saying is, if you're not going to be investing in, and the problem is, it seems like only the people that are really properly loading 10 millimeter isn't the people that are in cheap ammo or cheap range ammo, and or even like regular run-of-the-mill hollow points. It seems like the only people that are really loading 10 millimeter properly is like Underwood or Grizzly or Buffalo Bore. And if you're not, I can't stress enough the price of that ammunition. When you're getting like $2 to $3 a round, like you'll say, oh yeah, no, I want 10 millimeter, but then go out and buy real 10 millimeter. Go out and buy real 10 millimeter. That, especially if you want to practice with it, make sure it's everything too. We'll get to reliability. So if you're worried about reliability, 10 millimeter is going to be the worst reliable. And I explain by that is, one, because you have a lot of companies making 10 millimeter that's not loaded properly. So if you have a big, this is just as big and heavy as this 45. And son of a bitch, I'm leaving it. If you have a gun built for 10 millimeter with heavy springs, and a lot of these companies are giving you weak ass for 10 millimeter, meaning 40 cal power. There's no problem with 40 cal power, 400 to 450 pounds of energy maybe, but out of a 10 millimeter gun, it's not going to cycle it properly. That's the problem, because you have fake 10 millimeter. That's a problem. I don't really see that happening in 45. You just don't see that happening in 45. I think because the capability of 10 millimeter, if it's really done properly, you're talking easily 650 to 750 pounds of energy. A 10 millimeter done by its original standard, done properly, is a sub-magnum cartridge, you could say. Or you could just call it a possible magnum cartridge. Not exactly 41 magnum, but a true, well, what the fuck is magnum mean anyways, right? Because if you had a 357 magnum but only a 2-inch barrel with a 158 grain bullet, how much energy and power you get out of that? Maybe 550, maybe. If you talk, maybe even sub 500, depending on the round, right? Or if you go 125 grain high velocity with a smaller bullet. The point is, well, what's magnum? Let's example, a 10 millimeter at 180 grain, if it was going like 1,350 feet per second, is that not magnum? I don't know. You tell me what magnum is. You tell me. The point is, though, the original specs or full power 10 millimeter, 750 pounds of energy, is serious, and that's where 10 millimeter jumps over the 40 and 45, even 45 plus PS horsepower. But the problem is, here's the problem. I already said it. You're generally not going to find that ammunition. Why? Because most people aren't going to be shooting it. Most people aren't going to want to pay for that. Most people aren't going to handle it. And a lot of companies, in my opinion, they're afraid to put out that kind of level of power in a handgun cartridge, because if something goes wrong, especially in a polymer gun, you could really blow up your gun. Really. If you have a gun that fires with slightly heavy battery, that's when you can have a kaboom. So if your springs are weak, or you're not cleaning your gun, and the gun, you think you're chamber the next round, but it's just slightly not closed, that's when, especially with the older Glocks and having a fully supported chamber, that's where it can go off. You want to clean your firearms for many reasons, not just for long-term durability, but cleaning your firearms, make sure that everything's operating properly after you shoot them. That way, when you're shooting, you're making sure that the slide and everything is locking up properly. If you have a gun that's really fouled up and really dirty, it could lead to other issues. When I say it could. It probably won't, but it could. So what are we talking about here? You already know the 45 is the Lord's caliber. Whether you're going with even just ball ammunition, the 45 still can get the job done. 2 World Wars, right? I mean, no, there's no joke. 45 is not a fucking joke. It's a FUD round, right? You can call whatever the fuck you want. You can call 45 whatever the fuck you want. Just you wouldn't want to get in the way with them. 45, even in ball ammunition. I hate the word range ammunition. Range ammunition. People have been using 45 or ball ammunition, or full metal jackets for war, for killing each other for a long time, over 100 years. So America was just so, I guess, gun enthusiast that war used for ammunition used for wars is range ammunition. It's for fun. So the point is though, so cheaply, if you were stocking up for shit hits the fan, shit hits the fan, I'm just going ball ammunition because you get better penetration, and it's just going to be cheaper to stock up on. Okay, and the ball ammunition is not going to care about heavy clothing, whatever. And it's negligible. The biggest reason why you're using hollow points is so you don't have in a normal situation, in a civil society, if you have to defend yourself, you don't want that round to come out to the person and possibly hurt someone else or damage someone else's property. But the notion that an expanding hollow point gets bigger, it doesn't. Any hollow point, meaning this is 200, this right here is a 200 grain 10 millimeter. It doesn't get bigger. It's always going to be 200 grain. In fact, as it expands, it might shed some weight because it might break apart. But let's just say it stays together. This 200 grain 10 millimeter is 40 caliber in diameter. If this expands to, let's say, from 40 caliber to 80 caliber, while it's expanding, when it goes through something, one, it's not that diameter the whole time. Two, as it expands this way, it's going to get shorter this way. So when you say a hollow point expands, it's a false statement. A hollow point expands in width, but a hollow point shrinks in length. So a true statement you could say is, I like hollow points because they get shorter. That's not a false statement. Hollow points, if they expand, get shorter. But they got wider, sure. Imagine making your cock wider, but then losing half your length. Now you decide which is better. It's not my business. But the fallacy that and then along the way, what do you lose when these things expand? Penetration. Right? Well, so I'm not saying hollow points are stupid. I'm not saying that at all. Right? Because maybe there's that sweet spot of a full power cartridge. Now, of course, we're talking about against human defense. If you're going against bear and using a hollow point, it's pretty stupid. Because these aren't heavy enough cartridges. You want full metal jacket, or you want a hard lead, cast lead. You want something solid against a bear, or something that heavy bone, that much fur and fat. But for self-defense, yeah, I guess hollow points are fine. But then you have to worry about barrier penetration, auto glass, doors, wood, etc. You get what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it's a crazy world. So, and then you're hoping, if you're carrying hollow points, because they expand, right? They dump their energy, right? Sure. You're hoping that they expand. Do they always expand? No. They don't always expand. At least you know with a hard cast bullet or a full metal jacket, it always penetrates. So the full metal jacket or hard cast are more reliable. Guaranteed they're going to penetrate. Whatever it is, it's fucking penetrating. Hollow points, you're hoping them to do something else. You're hoping them to penetrate and expand. And against gelatin and whatever in a controlled environment, that might be fantastic. But in the real world, against someone with a lot of clothing and or very fat and or a lot of factors, you know what I'm saying though? Doesn't always go like you planned. It doesn't always go like you planned. And then let's talk about reliability again with the 10 millimeter. You better get to know that ammunition in your firearm and make sure it works. The problem is it's expensive, 10 mil ammunition, especially in hollow points. And if you're running around protecting yourself in the woods with a 10 millimeter and you don't know if it works properly, if you haven't fired a couple of boxes through that gun, it's kind of stupid. You really want to know. It's a longer cartridge, and therefore it's going to require more to extract and to chamber the next round. So after the rounds get shot, you have just the brass. But this has the longest brass. Therefore, in theory, this is longer. Length is distance. Distance is resistance. And it's more of a challenge. So 10 millimeter. You want to make sure that your gun and your extractor, everything's working properly, and the velocity of the round is chambered for. It's working right. Now, I've had no issues with any of these firearms, reliability and durability at all. And I keep my guns clean, and that's that. So which one would I pick? For all intents and purposes, the 40 is the most practical. The 40, you're getting 10 millimeter light, in a sense, power. So there's a part where 40 caliber and 10 millimeter cross. A good powered 40 at like 400 to 500 pounds of energy is very similar to a 10 millimeter that's loaded on the light side, meaning not to full potential 10 millimeter, but on the light side. So, I mean, is that still to be scoffed? You're talking about, let's say, a 165 or a 180 grain bullet. If it's loaded to a low side on 10 millimeter, is that weak? There's nothing weak about that. It's still very superior to 9 millimeter in every category. And with the 40 caliber, it's the only one here that full size, you don't have to carry this thicker slide and larger grip and larger magazines. With the 40 caliber, do I got it here? Son of a bitch, here you go. All these are 15 rounds, but this 40 cal magazine, I'm sorry, the 45 is 13 rounds, but with the 40 cal magazine, it's much thinner and lighter. So the 40 caliber wins if you're worried about, well, if you want the most convenient of the three, the 40 cal you get is equal rounds to 10 millimeter, more rounds than the 45. It's lighter than the 10 and 45. It's going to have the least recoil of the three. And whatever, we're not going to get into accuracy and triggers, because you could buy these guns in multiple different brands. That's up to you. That's it. This is just in case they're all Glock. This is a control situation. If you want to do an M&P or you want to do a SIG in 10 or 40 or 40, they're all great brands, whatever you want to do. I'm not here promoting Glock. I like Glock in certain aspects because used, they're very cheap. I bought these all used and I got them very cheap. So, and the main thing about Glock is the magazines are really cheap. You could buy surplus mags for $10. I cannot buy Sig Sauer, Smith & Wesson, HK, definitely not HK. I cannot get used magazines. These are used magazines for $10, and it ran flawless. And if I want, I could just replace the spring for a few dollars and call it a day. But there was just police surplus magazines. This one's made in 1994. Runs perfectly. But even if I bought a brand new 40 cal Glock magazine, 22 rounds. Wow. That's significant firepower, and it's a factory magazine. You can get that for like $25. So the biggest selling point of Glocks is used. They're very cheap. If anything breaks, they're very cheap to fix, and the parts are extremely available. And generally, you can do it yourself. Although I'm not a gunsmith, so whatever. Take that advice. And the magazines are the cheapest and most available, and have the largest factory mag settings. So yeah. But are they the best gun? No, HK makes a better gun. The problem with HK is they're very stingy on mag capacity. Like, when's the last time you've seen HK releasing 20, 30 round magazines from the factory? And what would those even fucking cost, right? So is HK using the strongest material and have the best finish? Like, when the gun's done, the machining is unrealistic compared to Glock. Yeah. However, though, the heavy trigger on the DASA on the HKs, it's kind of heavy, and they're not as good on the trigger as far as compared to a Beretta or SIG or a Smith & Wesson DASA. I digress. So yeah, the strongest gun as parts and materials is HK, although their capacity is let behind everyone else, and their price is astronomical, and the used category, the price can be very astronomical too, especially in the USP category. So depending what you want. If you're buying because of collectability, don't buy Glock. Glocks are stupid. They're not collectible. But Glocks are cheap and effective. So if you're strictly saying, I just want some more guns, cheap and effective, and cheap magazines. There's nothing faster and cheap to stock up on than use Glock. And they run. Are they pretty? No, they're pretty. They're pretty fucking ugly. But they're simple and they work. So it depends what you're trying to do. Yeah, if you want a gun just to look at, the HK is superior. It's superior. It's better looking. It's even more accurate. When I say more accurate, it's not like the Glocks aren't accurate, because the HK is going to have you be more accurate. And like the guide rod on this, Glock says 3,000 to 5,000 rounds on all these to replace. I would replace the 40 and the 10mm much faster than the 45. Because the 45 is a much lower velocity, and it's just so it's not making that spring work as hard. The point is, though, if you buy the HK USP 45, you don't got to change that guide rod spring in 3,000 rounds. I don't even think you'd ever have to change that guide rod spring. And I'm going to be dead fucking serious. I mean, they've done tests where they ran 50,000 rounds of 45. Stock parts, no breakage. I wouldn't put 50,000 rounds to this Glock without changing the guide rod. So you understand what I'm saying, though. So Glocks work, but the guide rod and maybe some of the springs, maybe every 5,000 rounds, I would really change them out. But with 40 caliber, especially, because remember the 40 caliber this is in a 9mm size gun. This is a Glock 17. That basically they converted to 40 caliber. So when you go with Glock, except Gen 5, they finally made a heavier slide. When you go with Glock Gen 2, 3, and 4, when it comes to 40 caliber, you want to replace that guide rod spring. Because when that thing gets shot out and gets worn out, now this thing is really built for 9mm, because it's the same guide rod poundage. The Glock 17 spring is a Glock 22 spring, but it's shooting 40 caliber. So especially if you're going with a spicy 155 grain, that thing's cycling so fast because it's high velocity, you're going to beat the shit out of your gun. So you need to be placing that guide rod spring faster, maybe every 2,000 rounds in 40 caliber. How much does a Glock guide rod spring cost? Good, I'm glad you asked. I ordered one yesterday for $5 fucking dollars. $5. So I don't care if you replaced it every fucking year. And then just keep it the other one from last year as a backup. But I mean, you know. So on a 40 caliber Glock, you want to refresh your guide rod springs. That's what's going to be slowing down the slide velocity. Because this is a 9mm gun they converted to 40 caliber. These guns here are not 9mm guns they converted to 10mm. This is not a 9mm gun they converted to 45. These guns are 40 and 10mm guns from the get-go. These are massive, big fucking guns. The slide on this 45 here is fucking significantly heavier and beefier than the 40 caliber. Same thing I could say about this. Beefier and heavier than the 40 caliber. Let's do a little side by side. You see the difference? And so that's just skinnier there at the back, but that weight transfers down. Oh, dang. There you go. Stack them up like Klondike bars. Come on, guys, hang out, be friends. So anyways, though, what's my point? All three calibers are effective. All three calibers are superior to 9mm. Anyone telling you 9mm is the same, anyone telling you 9mm is better than 40 or 45, they're of the devil. They're fucking lying. They're fucking lying so hard. They're lying so hard it's not even funny. Don't believe them. Especially when you go on micro guns with a 3.5 inch barrel and you think your 9mm is better than 40 or 45. Can I laugh at your face? In the words of the great Steven Seagal, can I laugh at your face? 9mm is fucking a weak cartridge. It's fine at its best case if you're using like Plus P or Plus P Plus and out of a full-size barrel. I can see that. You get a little more rounds, okay. You start going to like non-Plus P ammo and you start going to a small compact gun like a 3-inch barrel, I can't stress it enough. I mean, you do what you want. You do what you want. But anyways, though, against real calibers, man-sized calibers, 40 caliber, 45, and a 10mm, know what you're getting into. Understand when you go with 40 cal, my recommendation is getting a full-size one. If you go with a compact 40 caliber, even if it's built for 40 caliber, a shorter 40 is still going to run. It's going to wear out faster. 40 is a hard cartridge. It's because most guns in 40 caliber are 9mm size guns, and no matter what, even if they kind of designed it for 40 caliber, it's going to wear out the gun faster. So an equal, for example, if you have a USP 9, a USP 40, or if you have a SIG 229 in 40 caliber and a SIG 229 in 9mm, if you shoot them equally with the same brand ammunition, the 40 caliber is going to wear out the springs faster and the extractor. But the question is, if it's doing that, what does that mean from the other side? It's giving you more power and more performance. So just understand that most 40 calibers are still built in 9mm size guns. You want to refresh the springs on a more frequent basis. So yeah, my point is though, so 40 caliber, understand the cartridge. It's serious, and the recoil for some people might be snappy because, once again, a lot of the 40 caliber guns are designed in 9mm guns, and so now the gun has more recoil than the 9mm because it was never built for 40 caliber. So I digress. Some of the issues with 40 caliber is not the caliber, is with the platform. Remember, the cartridge is not the gun, and the gun is not the cartridge. So if most of the guns were 9mm, and they just end up stuffing a larger barrel with the same springs and stuffing 40 caliber, understand that round is going to wear out the springs faster than 9mm, significantly faster. And understand that gun's going to bark a little more. Why? Because it's got significantly more power. If 40 caliber is easily 400 to 500 pounds of energy, depending on the gun, and 9mm is 275 to 350, because you're only going to get 400 pounds of energy in 9mm if you go to plus P, and if you're in a full-size barrel. You're not going to see that if you're in a micro 3-inch piece of shit barrel. Even plus P, very unlikely you're going to see 400 pounds of energy. The point is though, so if you're talking about 100 to 150 pounds more of energy, if you're talking about almost 50% more power than 9mm with a full powered 40, in the same size 9mm gun, it's going to wear things out faster. Replace your springs. But what are you getting along the way? You're getting a more powerful cartridge. Everything has to ebb and flow. People wanted a more powerful cartridge in their 9mm gun, and 40 cal delivered. However, though, it's in a 9mm size gun. It's going to wear it out faster. Because very few people, I guess, wanted a 40 caliber in a 45 or 10mm size gun. That gun would never wear out. So, but that would be a lot bigger and heavier though. So, I guess 40 being in the middle, it would be too small for 10mm 45 platforms, and that it would have never worn out. But if you stuff it into a 9mm size gun, it's going to wear it out faster if you shoot it a lot. And that's why with Gen 5 Glock finally made a slide that was beefier than the 9mm, but not as beefier as the 45. I guess Glock finally admitting, well, we should put a slightly heavier slide to offset that. And nobody cares. So I like the light slide in 40 caliber in the Gen 2, Gen 3, or even Gen 4. You just got to change out the springs faster though. I'll do that for $5. I'll put one new one in every year, preemptively, just to protect the gun, protect the frame, and because you're getting more 40 full-size 40 caliber ammunition is better than 9mm plus P all day. And when people say 9mm is cheaper, it's not, because when you go with defense ammunition, especially when you go with, if you're trying to get to 40 caliber, 9mm plus P ammo is going to be just as expensive as 40 caliber, and maybe more, because for a lot of 40 cal ammo is getting dumped because it's still being bought, but it's not being bought. The American market is, if it's not selling right away, oh, it sucks, right? So I bought 50 rounds of this HST 180 grain full powered hollow point, and one of the best hollow points for defense, the HSTs. I spent, I think, $20 or $25 for a box of 50. So less than 50 cents a round for this. That's great. So anyways though, so my warning with 40 is understand what gun, be picky, I guess, or well, if you're gonna get a standard size 40 caliber that's generally built in 9mm size guns, change out your guide rod springs on a regular basis to just protect the platform. right? If you're not going to shoot that much, then that's not going to matter, right? Anyways, 45 ammunition is going to be more than 40 ammunition cost. You're going to get a little less rounds. But remember, those less rounds happen at the end of the magazine. Because for the first 13 or 14 rounds, if you're going with a Glock or an XD, most self-defense is 1 or 2 rounds. 45 is a big boy. 45 is serious. Anyone tell you 45 is stupid? It's not. These 45s open up to 1 inch. 45 is a serious cartridge. I can't stress it enough. And you can go down to 175 or 185 grains of 45, which is light for caliber. Standard for caliber 180, 10 millimeters, light for 45, meaning a 45 at 185 grain is going to be very fast for 45, and in the hollow point you get very good expansion. Although you will lose some penetration because the overall length now you're going to have a short length for caliber. Anyways, though, 45 is classic. The ammo is available, and in 45, in all these, even in Full Metal Jacket, whether it's 10 millimeter, 40 or 45, these all would, if you had to, still be a good woods gun. People have killed bear or killed animals in the woods with Full Metal Jacket, 10 millimeter, 40, 45. I've seen guys killing deer with 40 caliber, 180 FMJ. It's very, very possible. Might not be a first choice when we use maybe a hard cast, or a plus P. The point is though, the benefit of these calibers, yes, their ammo, all 3 of these ammos, even in range ammo, is going to cost more than 9 millimeter. And I give you that. 9 millimeter is a bit cheapest to shoot. But you get a lot more with these calibers. These are significantly more powerful cartridges. And if you're going to be in the woods, you'd rather have these than 9 millimeter. You'd rather have these. If not, you're an idiot. Or maybe you just can't handle it. Okay, fine, but I guess 9 millimeter is better than nothing. But yes, if you're getting attacked by a bear or something like that, you'd rather have 40, 45, or 10 millimeter over 9 millimeter. Because you might only have time for 2 shots. Yeah, I mean, you're out of your mind. Oh, 9 millimeter, you got 17 rounds. Okay, so those 2 extra rounds are at the end. What if you only have time? Time. When your life's in danger, it's all about time. How much time is your life in danger? And how much time do you have before you're dead? It might only be 1 or 2 seconds. It might only be one or two shots you got. So I get 9 millimeter capacity. Sure, it holds more rounds. Once again, when you go with the Glock series, all of them can hold a lot of rounds. So the point is, though, capacity does not mean capability. Capability, round per round, up front, these are all superior to 9 millimeter. And if not, you're lying to yourself. So you can't go wrong with any of these. I'd say get them all. That's my opinion. Each one has benefits. 45 is just the Lord's caliber and it's so classic. That's a simple one to choose. Between the 10 and 40, you got to ask yourself, if you're not going to be willing to invest in, if you want a hunting cartridge, or a serious woods gun, get the 10 millimeter. But remember, you need to invest in a very expensive ammunition, so you're getting proper 10 millimeter. Do I wish that was the case? No. But I'm telling you right now, so many manufacturers that are making 10 millimeter, they're not making 10 millimeter. They're literally loading 40 caliber amount of power to 10 millimeter. So don't lie to yourself and thinking, I'll just buy 10 millimeter because it's more powerful than 40. It's not. And there's multiple guys testing ammunition online. Don't take my word, take theirs. If your 10 millimeter ammunition is 400 to 500 pounds of energy, you should just save your time, money, and weight of the gun and get 40 caliber. There's nothing wrong with 400, 500 pounds of energy. It's a powerful cartridge. But when you go with 10 millimeter, you should be getting 600 to 700 pounds of energy. The problem is all that ammunition is going to be pricey. Much more pricier than both of these. So the most realistic makes sense in 40. You're going to get more capacity than 45 if that's your issue. It's going to be less cost than both of these. For capacity and cost, the 40 wins in these three cases. But remember, the issue with 40, it's not really an issue, but something to be aware of. Like I was saying before I took this 40 caliber up and my stack of Glocks fell. The point is, though, if you're going to go with 40, understand that the 40 especially 40s from the original designs, like in the 90s, early 2000s, they were all basically just 9mm guns with 9mm springs in 9mm handguns. So understand that you need to replace the springs if you're going to shoot it a lot. That's my opinion. Well, that's really a fact, though. That's not even an opinion. Fuck that. That's a fact. So, I mean, Glock proved that fact by in Gen 5 going, you know what, let's put a little wider slide. Because weight on the slide never wears out. Springs wear out, but weight never goes out as far as mass. So that's why Glock went with a wider slide on the Gen 5 40 caliber. So you do what you want. If you're going to go with 40 caliber, you might have to replace your springs occasionally. If you go with 10mm, you really have to make sure you're getting real 10mm power, or you're lying to yourself, and you might be jamming. So this, you might have, in 40 caliber, you might have your guns eventually break because you're not replacing the springs, especially if it was only built in 9mm. But that's a very quick fix. Every like 2,000-3,000 rounds, if it's a Glock, buy a $5 extra spring. You're getting more power over 9mm, but that means your spring is wearing out faster. So every 2,000, 3,000 rounds, replace the spring on the 40 caliber. On the 10mm though, your problem's not up front. I mean, your problem's up front. Up front, no problem, but later on, you should change the springs faster. On the 10mm, your problem front is a lot of brands aren't giving you true 10mm. That's a problem. So your gun might jam on you. And on top of that, you're not getting the performance of true 10mm should be kind of scary. True 10mm should be kind of scary. I'll say that again. So if you're not getting true 10mm power, you're wasting cost and size and weight. 45, you don't have to really worry about that. Most companies are giving you 45 power ammunition because the biggest selling point of the 45 isn't the amount of powder behind it in the charge. It's about the size of the bullet. That big old 230 grain motherfucking bullet. And we have gold on. 45. Big boy. And even if this is only going to go 850 feet per second, this is not a plus P. It's a massive cartridge in diameter, a set diameter. So even if it doesn't expand, it's already almost half an inch. That means the whole wound channel along the way, even if it doesn't expand, it's going to be almost half an inch. Guaranteed every time. Other, like 9mm, 35 caliber, you're hoping it expands. Remember, at any time you expand, you only get wider this way. You get shorter in length. So no one talks about that with expanding hollow points. Everyone talks about, oh, look, the diameter got bigger, but your height got shorter. And the gun didn't gain any weight. 230 grain hollow point. It's always going to be 230 grain. And minimum, it's always going to be 45 caliber and 45. If it gets bigger to 75th of an inch or an inch itself, great. But you can't argue with weight. Weight is always weight. Energy and velocity is important, but it's not always velocity and energy. What do I mean by that? Well, at 50 yards, all these calibers aren't going to have the same velocity and energy at 50 yards. However, though, whatever weight they started off with, they still will be the same weight. A 45 at 50 yards is still 230 grains. A 40 caliber at 50 yards, if it's 180 grain, it's still 180 grain. So remember those factors too. Weight of a bullet and the grain is very important. When you go higher in weight though, you generally get lower energy. People will generally just buy with energy because they go, well, if you go lighter in caliber, you get more velocity, which gives you more energy, and that gives you more power. Yes, in some aspects, but especially against thick-skinned targets, like animals, or through car doors or whatever. Especially if you're not at point-blank range. Remember, weight is always going to be weight. The cartridge, the bullet never loses weight. Now, of course, if it starts breaking apart after it hits the target, that's a different category. So anyway, so these are the things to think about. 40 caliber, 40 and 45. Did I already say that? 10, son of a bitch. 40 caliber, 45, and 10 millimeter. Powerful cartridges. 10 millimeter, make sure you're getting full power at 10 millimeter. Might jam your gun and you're lying to yourself if you're not getting full 10. 45, less of those issues. Um, yeah, you'll hear some issues. People with the 10 millimeter Glocks or 10 millimeter SIGs. Oh, jamming, reliability. Yeah, because depending what kind of ammunition you're getting, and if you're not getting the proper velocity, and if you go with a 10 millimeter flat nose, that's a long cartridge, maybe the gun jams. You don't really hear any issues with the Glock 21, or people having issues with it jamming on that. So yes, the 45 will never be the powerhouse that 10 millimeter can be. I say can be, because if it's not a full power 10 millimeter, then so 45 makes a simple choice. If you say, you know what, the ammunition should be less than 10 millimeter, it'd be more available in 10 millimeter. I'm only holding 2 less rounds, but in plus P45, I'm getting still plenty of power. I can maybe add a spring and change a barrel, go to 45 Super, and be right around 10 millimeters. So 45, you get a lot of range, a lot of reliability, plenty of ammunition, and it's a big fat bullet that even if you don't care if it doesn't expand, it's still a big heavy fat bullet, and that's nice to have. 40 caliber, if you want a 9mm size gun, but with around 45 caliber power, 40 cal is your answer. Just remember, 40 caliber will wear the springs out faster than the 9mm size gun. Change the springs. That's my solution. That's what we're done talking about. Instead of just saying the pros and cons, it's just more about understanding each caliber, how it operates in the gun, how the market operates, price of ammunition, and fallacies about 10 millimeter power. A lot of brands aren't giving you 10 millimeter. That sucks. Get yourself full power 10 millimeter. It'll be more reliable, and that's what you're paying for. So the power 10 millimeter is the king if the king is getting true 10 millimeter power. In weight, the 45 is king, and it's a good option overall in cost and availability. 45 is available everywhere. That's nice, It's a big old bullet, especially for a woods gun and bear. Maybe the 10 millimeter makes sense, but 45 can do everything, woods and self-defense, and no one can argue with that. And the 45 will have maybe less recoil, unless you go with a real heavy woods 45 plus P. The 45 should be less recoil than 10 millimeter. 40 caliber is kind of hiding behind the big boys there, but 40 caliber is no slouch. The biggest trade-off in the 40 caliber, like I said, is you better replace your springs, your extractor springs, maybe replace the extractor on a faster basis, because this is a 9mm gun with basically a 10mm light cartridge. There's 40 caliber, it's a 10mm light. So it is what it is. I'll see you around. I hope this is entertaining information. It's important to talk about these things. Jeremy knows this.